So I will record this and I will post it to YouTube. We have a few issues on YouTube in Western Civ, so I had to kind of make a little bit of a change. I got a lot of people watching, and a couple people, so I open up the chat so people have questions and go back and answer it. And a few people got on there too, who are not in my class.
That's cool.
They weren't anything bad, but it's like they bugged the people who were on there.
Oh, we got fans.
And so, yeah, I know. I mean, they were just, you know, kind of just on. Nothing, it's just like, I got to do something else. So, we have an essay test tomorrow. And so you're going to write an essay in class. You can have your brainstorm outline and thesis. I went over that in class on Tuesday. So I went all through that. And you are responsible for what I talked about in class. But are there any questions on that? Went through a thesis. In that opening paragraph, you do need context, 2 or 3 sentences of background material, and that's the information from your brainstorm list that you don't use in your body of your essay. So if it's going to be about the Constitution, give a few events that led up to it, a couple things outside your brainstorm list that's going on, then your thesis statement. You got a good opening paragraph. You've got to get that context in there. And in the closing, you can add kind of like proof the thesis, and if you have time, one more bit of context. And then your thesis, don't forget, you have to have the main topic, which I call X, your position, which is Y, and then the blueprint, A, B, or A, B, and C. I'll let you write a 4 or 5 paragraph essay tomorrow. Everyone got that? And then the body paragraphs, which are essentially like short IDs. But you must everything, you know, explain what it is. First, I need a topic sentence to explain what it is, you know, when, where. Give an example or 2 examples, and then when you say why it's important, you relate it back to how you address the question in your thesis. You have to relate it back to that. Has everyone got that? You can have your brainstorm, outline, and thesis when you come into class tomorrow. The questions have already been dropped. They are in the assignments, so it should say, I think just essay test, right? I'm pretty sure that's all it says, essay test, specialist era. And the questions there, you have 3 questions. How many must you answer? 4. So answer 1 question. They're pretty good choices too. We got the Constitution, we have the parties, and we have Jefferson's philosophy. So good questions, good choices. Has everyone got what you can have? You will turn in your brainstorm outline and thesis. I want that. I just want to see your organized. That's all. I'm just making sure you're organized.
Yeah. What if you just like, did you write the essay on your document?
No. If you have that, then I'll put the whole thing away. You just have to brainstorm outline and thesis.
Will this be on the first one?
I'm going to try to get it. And essays always take a little bit longer. You can for this one, I'm really not sure what's going to happen with the AP exam. Because in the past, it was always handwritten. So we do everything handwritten. A little harder on your grade, but then again, in a way, it's also, I think you do better. But you can type or write this. You decide. If you decide you want to type it, make sure you have your own laptop. Sound good? Which you already probably have. Because everybody should get it all the time. Yeah.
You need a typewriter?
Yes, I don't want a mechanical one. You have to put the pound down. And that's always fun because if you hit all the keys together, you can jam.
Yeah. I'm gonna find the loudest one.
And to make sure we jam, that's why we have the weird keyboard. That makes no sense. But now we're all, if you know how to type, you're all used to it. Most of you probably know how to type, right? You type on the keyboard now. Maybe a few times. All right. Are there any questions on the essay? Good questions. Quick outline. You can have that stuff. Anything? You have the period to write it. When the bell rings, I throw something at you. Oh, what did I tell you I'll do during it? Yeah, get the bell. I had to move the snowball. So every minute, right? About 5 minutes. Okay, sorry. That's really cruel. Okay, so let's get to work. Let's go take your notes out there. We got to the War of 1812. So let's get started. You want to see it?
Yeah. Is this the War of 1812?
Yep. We'll watch it. You guys have earned it. No! Jam.
This is the honors class. Isn't that awesome? And the best part is that those watching have no idea what we're doing.
It's still going.
Okay. Yeah, they don't make them like this anymore.
No, they don't.
The best part is this is a rap about the kids' toys, and on the back it says, "Not for children." Heck, we used to play broken glass, but now there's all these rules. Okay. So the War of 1812, we had Tecumseh leading that Confederation. Who was the American general and also the governor of Indiana, patrician from Virginia? What a brag, what a catch.
I know.
Who would lead the forces to attack the province town? Andrew Jackson. Who was the head? Yes.
It was Harrison.
Yeah, William Henry Harrison. And what was the battle? What was the battle? Tippecanoe. This is from Wednesday's note, which is an assignment, so you have to turn that in. But the Battle of Tippecanoe. Yes, not the Battle of the Somme or the bands. By the way, they did have the big super spreader disease that really hit. Lewis and Clark got our disease started. They had a band thing here. Was it like Freedom Ring or something? And all of a sudden, this case started going like mad. Thank you, people. But the Battle of Tippecanoe, and this is one of the most important battles in history, and at least American history. And people forget about it, I think, partially because it has a comical sounding name to English speakers, Tippecanoe, right? In fact, William Henry Harrison is going to be known for the rest of his life as Old Tip, or Old Tippecanoe. And when he would run for president in 1840, 29 years later, his slogan was Tippecanoe and Tyler too. It's running it was Tyler, John Tyler. And that word had meaning 29 years later as the war hero. By the way, he would be the counter to Andrew Jackson. Jackson, part of his fame would be the war hero. So the opposing party found a war hero, Old Tip. And after this battle, citizens of the United States would forever call themselves what? Americans. Before they were Virginians or New Yorkers, citizens of the US became Americans. And this became our continent. We deserve it. We own it. In fact, that really degraded what they thought of American Indians. American Indians were, remember I told you how they represented liberty, talked about the Boston Tea Party. More and more they became citizens of the US, savages who don't deserve the land. Racism took hold even more. They kind of thought that before, but it became the overwhelming opinion. And don't forget how, okay, we're all used to, in fact, all around the world, citizens of the US call themselves Americans. But if you really think about it, how arrogant that is. This is our continent. Canadians don't call themselves Americans, only we do. It doesn't make it bad, because it's just now, it's just so accepted. But there is an element of that. I've actually someone in Mexico talked to me about that. I said, you know, we are Americans too. And I said, yeah, you're right. I wasn't alive in the time. Yeah.
What is the alternative name you would?
What's that?
So instead of Americans, what would Americans be called?
Steve. Okay, with that, oh, I have no idea. That's not, you know, that's, but it just, that's, and it's so not saying, not even making a value judgment, except for the fact that that is like, it's ours. There'll be a term for this, and we'll talk about this more. It's called nationalism. We'll talk about it. Some of you already know what it is, but I'll get to more of that. When we hear the word patriotism, it's actually nationalism. But the War of 1812, then, let's get to it. Oh, Madison was president. I'll give you 3 reasons why the United States went to war. Or what he asked for the Declaration of War. What was one?
Neutrality rights.
Yeah, neutrality. Now it's the whole thing about stopping of ships. But ironically, the areas that were most affected by this were the harbor cities here. And their representatives voted against the war. What's the second reason? Yeah, that's the second reason why the United States. Yeah,
Security on the frontier.
yeah, security on that frontier. And what colony did the U.S. want?
Canada.
Canada. So security, and that's Tippecanoe. We blamed the British for Tippecanoe. By the way, Tecumseh, the remnants fled up to Canada. They had no place else to go. Enemy of my enemy becomes my friend. So the U.S. went to war. But part of the reason Madison was pushed to war was a group of young congressmen by the name of the Warhawks. The Warhawks. And the war hawks, okay, the term hawk would come to mean war. You're pro-war, you're a hawk. What bird would come to mean anti-war?
Dove.
Yeah, dove. But no one said partridge. But I'm peace loving. Yes, my first and last name is a bird. Yes, I know. Jay is my first name. Yeah, I know. Huh? Okay, so Henry Clay, oh, by the way, this means Republican Kentucky. Henry Clay, he became one of the most prominent politicians in American history. I can't even begin to tell you what a big deal he was. Felix Grundy was actually maybe more influential, but he died young. So we don't know what would happen, but these are all Westerners, all Republicans, and this guy. And so, from South Carolina. And so those would be the war hawks. Anybody know who that guy is? The most awful man ever to live. Oh, we jumped all the way there. He was not yet alive, even though he would be. He was the oldest president ever inaugurated until Trump became president. Reagan was. This man was never president. He is, of course, John C. Calhoun. It's hard to yell with a mask on. Calhoun, this horrific man. Look at this picture from the 1847. Look at the picture. Look at the picture. Look at the hair. Look at those eyes. Look at those eyes. He's looking at you. Look at that finger. It's got like 6 joints. That's one of those.
That's a goblin.
Yeah.
That looks like Beethoven.
If this is normal Halloween, by the way, I'm in the past, and I don't know how I'm going to work this out. I've always done a dress-up day right before Festivus break. We also had for Christmas break, and I always had a day, and we do a dress-up day for extra credit. And I know you're thinking, oh, we could choose what we dress. No, no. That's one of your 2 choices. And I know you think it's unfair. I know it's totally unfair, especially when you look at this picture of him. Now, everyone, look at this. Look at him. Look at him. Look into his eyes. No matter where you're at in this room, he's staring at you.
Also, where did his neck go? Like in the last picture,
Oh, you don't know where his neck is? That's neck hair. That's hair coming out of his neck. And those eyes. And look at him. He's staring into your soul.
Is that the exact same picture?
Yeah, it's up there. So it's always looking
Yeah,
at
it's
him.
a nice hair.
And what's he holding? He's strangling the puppy. No, he's not. No. Not a kitten either. It just, not look. Yeah, the most horrible man ever to live, and I'll tell you why. And the guy follows us. He haunts us. That's why we yell his name. To scare him so he doesn't come back. So we already have, oh, no, don't do that to me. So, the War of 1812 was quickly be dubbed Mr. Madison's War. You want to see Cavalry again?
Yeah.
I'll put them up while you take the exam, or the essay test tomorrow so you can look at them. They'll comfort you.
That's just fair. That's really comforting.
You're welcome.
No, he'll watch us.
Yeah, I mean, you can't escape those eyes. Yeah, I know one eye kind of goes out to this, one guy goes, yeah, it's totally messed up. He's messed up. He's still beloved in certain parts of the South. You'll find out why. So, there's no Federalist support in New England. In fact, in 1814, Federalists even threatened to leave the Union. They even threatened to secede, called the Hartford Convention. Thankfully, that never happened, because that's another one of those what-ifs in history. Next. Why are you doing this to me? Why is everyone out to get me? Don't worry about the numbers. The military is unprepared. I just put those down to remind me of the exact numbers. The tiny U.S. regular army was only 6,700 men. Britain had 10 times that number. Even with militia, the U.S. Army was no bigger than 35,000 men. By the way, what do militia always do?
Run.
Run away, yep. The British had over 200 ships of the line, which were battleships, and over 1,000 other ships. The U.S. Navy only had 16 small patrol boats called frigates, and only 7 of them were serviceable, could float when the war began. Do you see we're slightly outnumbered here? Do you get the point
It
here?
actually seems pretty even.
Yeah, pretty even. Fortunately, Britain's fighting Napoleon. And remember the Bank of the U.S.? Madison, who was opposed to the Bank of the U.S., they let the charter collapse. Ironically, Madison would be the one to sign the rechartering. The financial position of the U.S. collapsed. And when because the money collapsed, the value of the dollar, just at the time when the U.S. had to spend money to go to war. So this was a foolish war, ill-prepared. The United States wanted to take Canada. And they just assumed that the Canadians would all say, oh, we love the U.S. and join. That's what they thought. It happened that way. But 1812, Madison would be reelected as a wartime president. But you notice the Federalists are making a resurgence. Split Maryland right in half, making a resurgence. So Madison's reelected, but the war was going poorly. So invasion of Canada, a 3-pronged invasion with a tiny little U.S. Army and mostly militia. But, they would invade Lake Champlain. This might sound familiar. Remember Burgoyne in the Battle of Saratoga in 1777? They thought they could cut off New England, which maybe this could have worked. The British knew New England was anti-war. And so the Americans invaded right here, thinking we'll drive up into Montreal, and they'll all join the United States. Niagara, which is near present-day Buffalo, they would attack here, and Detroit, which has been just a fort and a little settlement. And how did these invasions by the U.S. do? Disaster, humiliating disaster, unbelievably humiliating disaster. In fact, at Niagara, there was a battle here, the Battle of Niagara, where the New York militia sat on a hill and watched the tiny U.S. Army get defeated by the British and Canadians, because the governor of New York didn't like the war, so he didn't allow the militia to go.
Just eat some popcorn.
Huh?
Just eat popcorn.
A popcorn, yeah. And here at Detroit, an entire U.S. force of 3,000 men surrendered without firing a shot. In fact, it's one of the great humiliations in American military history. So you think there's just a couple hundred regular soldiers in the militia. And the British had about 1,000 men and about 800 of the remnants of Tecumseh's Confederacy. And they surrendered to those. The British in Tecumseh are outnumbered nearly 2 to 1. Fort Detroit was a really powerful fort. General Hall, the American commander, a fossil essentially from the Revolutionary War, never a great general, advanced into Canada, saw the British and retreated and ran away. When he got to Detroit, the British and Tecumseh followed him. And it's all heavily forested, but there's a clearing about 5 miles from Fort Detroit where Hall, the American commander, could see the British and Tecumseh's men, but too far to fire. So what the British and Tecumseh did is, there's this clearing surrounded by forest. They marched in a column of the British first, across the clearing, and then out of sight in the forest. Tecumseh followed. So they marched in front to show General Hall what they had. They marched into the forest, again, out of sight of the Americans, and then what did those first men do? Yeah, they sprinted around and marched again 4 times. Hall bought it and surrendered. So there's almost defeats all the way across. I got to give you a few examples of American victories because this is a U.S. history class. So, this easy to follow West Point map should tell you everything you need to know, right? Got it? Pretty good?
Next slide, please.
Lots of arrows here. So, one of the small frigates that was made back in the 1790s, called the USS Constitution, would fight and win 2 one-on-one battles against British frigates. And so this would become the most famous ship of the U.S. Navy. In fact, so many cannonballs bounced off its oaken sides, it's made of oak, that they would call it Old Ironsides. That's where we get this nickname, Old Ironsides. And that's the Constitution right there. And that ship is the oldest ship that's still in the active duty of the United States Navy today. This sailing vessel made in the 1790s. Still in the U.S. Navy, has a U.S. Navy crew. Yeah.
Do they dress up in revolutionary war?
They dress up like sailors today. And
They still use cannons?
huh? Yeah, they still have they have cannons. Yeah, they still have the 12 pound, 20 pound. And so, for example, in 2003, when the United States invaded Iraq, it shelled the coast of Iraq, that ship. And so with that, moving on.
Nice.
Okay, what's wrong with that story I just told you? Yes, the ship still is in the U.S. Navy. It's in Boston. You can go tour, and your tour guide's a U.S. It's a Navy petty officer, not a sergeant. It's really cool. And my nephew actually got to ride on it when it sailed 10 years ago. I'm very jealous. But secondly, no, we're not going to have a ship in the 1790s shell the coast of Iraq. Oh, and there's no coast of Iraq. So, with that, the Battle of Lake Erie, I'm using this banner of a made-up story of a U.S. ship that was sunk, and the Captain Lawrence Bolden, said, "Do not give up the ship." But a small U.S. fleet beat a small British fleet on Lake Erie. And not that this was a decisive victory, but it was a victory. And Oliver Hazard Perry, the U.S. Navy Commodore, which is a temporary commander of that fleet, is a captain. He sent back to Washington, D.C. this great line: "We have met the enemy, and they are ours." Great line. Just a second. I'm just going to make sure this is going. Oh, shoot. And this is a, where I think we're recording. We're good. Okay, this is a, you might have heard Veni, Vici, which Caesar said, "We came, we saw, we conquered." Julius Caesar said back in 58 BC. And so that's what he's copying. Great line. Perry would become one of the heroes. And one more. A small U.S. raiding party into Canada under the same General Harrison from Tippecanoe would win a small victory at the Battle of the Thames. And Tecumseh was there. The British fled the battlefield, and Tecumseh's forces were overwhelmed. Tecumseh would die here, thus ending the last Confederacy, the last real attempt to stop the expansion of the United States. Harrison would add another, big victory, the Battle of the Thames, Battle of Tippecanoe. He'd become one of the most famous Americans of the early part of the century. And yes, he would use Tippecanoe and the Thames to become president in 1840.
And then didn't die.
A month in office, yeah.
Nice work.
And no one ever recovered Tecumseh's body. And maybe some time I'll tell you a little bit of that story down the road. Probably do it when we get to Harrison, but that's Battle of the Thames. But in 1814, the U.S. is just barely holding on. I gave it a few victories. The war is going forward. And then in 1814, Napoleon was defeated. And now the British can turn on their full force on the United States. And they had a four-pronged attack. And they wanted to punish the U.S. They knew they weren't going to conquer the U.S., just punish them. And at the peace conference, they could get a good deal. So strengthen the blockade. And this turned out to be very effective blockade. Attack at Lake Champlain. Okay, you try to attack us, failed, we're going to cut off New England. Next, advance up to Chesapeake and a raid on the new U.S. capital, Washington, D.C., and the growing harbor town of Baltimore. So up the Chesapeake Bay. And then lastly, the important harbor city of New Orleans. So the blockade was effective, very effective. Very effective. This happened first, middle of the summer. Here, a little bit later, you have to wait till good time to fight it, but also for the good winds. But New Orleans won't happen until the winter, because you have to wait till hurricane season. Make sense? By the way, did you see New Orleans was hit, or Louisiana was hit by another hurricane just yesterday?
I heard there was some sort of crazy thing about it. Like it's a huge hurricane making a whole bunch of crazy clouds. Like, good lord.
It's their fifth named storm this year that's hit Louisiana.
Aren't we on Z for names?
Huh? Yeah. They've already gone through all the letters.
Are we just gonna go back around the block?
Yeah. They make up new. They go to Greek there. No, they just start, yeah, they start over again. And yeah, this is not, this, I guess I was about to say this is not normal, but this is the new normal. I'm old, so I won't have that long to live with it, but you guys, wow. That's me being facetious in a very dark way.
Good for us.
Yeah, it's
Nothing's less.
a new normal. So the blockade worked. At Lake Champlain was a shocking victory by the American fleet. A shocking victory. So they basically had to make a fleet from scratch on the shores. So these are relatively small boats, and they just were packed. Most of the cannon were cannon from the Army they just packed on. And a small U.S. fleet of about 16 ships beat a slightly bigger British fleet. And how they did it, and this is a lithograph of it, Captain McDonald's victory on Lake Champlain. The ships were not quite this nice with the nice rigging. It's much more, they were pretty crude. But each ship at its stern, at its bow, had an anchor on port and starboard side. Does that make sense? They have an anchor on both sides, so the chain will go down. And McDonald knew, with the relatively shallow bottom of the Lake Champlain, and the fact that he just had to hold his ground, the British had to break through, he came up with a great tactic that could only be used in situations like this. He didn't invent it, but he used it. If the British were coming this way, he had all the ships, just imagine we're looking down on. Does that make sense? The ship looking down? Anchor here, anchor here. Current going this way. He put down both anchors, had every ship put down both anchors. Locked this anchor. So this chain is now stable. Let this one go slack. So the chain will just unroll. And with the current, what did the ship do? It turned on this. Does that make sense? It turned like that. And when he got it to here, exact opposite, they locked the chain. Does that make sense? Do you see the advantage this has? The ships have guns on both sides. Cannon. It takes about 5 minutes to load them all. And so they would fire them all. You have to wait 5 minutes to fire again. So that's what the British have to do. He would have his ships fire and then do what? Pull that chain in. And what does the ship do? Turn its back. It doubled their fire. Clever, huh? And that's how they won the battle. So New England stayed in the Union. But then the Chesapeake campaign was much different. Now this is a raid, and it's going to go up Chesapeake Bay by Virginia. Here's the Potomac River that runs by Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is tiny. It's tiny. Just a few government buildings, a few people live there. And here's Baltimore, becoming a very important harbor city. It's a raid on both. A year earlier, the Americans raided the Canadian town of York, where they had their colonial capital. York is today Toronto. And they burned the capital down. So this is the revenge. And their plan's pretty good. The British landed 6,000 crack troops. They had been fighting against the French in Spain and across southern France for 7 years. These guys were experienced soldiers and not happy. They thought the wars were over, and now they have to go fight those people from the U.S. Who are those Americans? They did a diversion here, but then the main attack was marching overland at a little town called Bladensburg. Bladensburg, Maryland. The Americans met them with 5,000 troops. But what kind of troops were they? All the trained troops. Every trained troop the U.S. had, every trained one troop. It's right here. There's no roads. They can't get here. So there's only militia. But there's a stone wall at Bladensburg. And the main defense was going to be at the stone wall. This map doesn't show it completely. The stone wall is right here outside of town. Stone wall along a road. About this high. See, a good place to defend, isn't it? Have the men stand behind the wall. They feel relatively safe. So General Ross, the British commander, his plan was he'd beat through a small American force here, advance to this line, and then their plan was simple. Fire 2 shots, fix bayonets, does that sound familiar? And get them. Just get them. No, they really weren't. But the problem with being creative is, once you gave orders, you lost control because you had no radios. And so it had to be pretty simple to keep control. So the American forces were there. In fact, President Madison, Secretary of State Monroe, they all came down to watch the fun. They're on a hilltop over here watching. The American forces behind the wall. The British marched to 15 steps. They're scared, but they're ready. The British fired their one round. All the American militia, 5,000 men, did what? Yes, fast as they could. Go. The whole line just took off running full speed. And they ran this way, fast as they could go. They ran so fast that the British would call it the Bladensburg races because they couldn't catch them. They ran all the way through Washington, D.C. Madison just had enough time to get back to the Capitol, get back to the executive mansion that was known, get out a few personal goods, got his wife out of there, and took off. In fact, there are spots marked where you can see they're in Washington, D.C. You can go stand. This is where Madison saw British forces enter the executive mansion. This is where President Madison watched British forces enter the Capitol. They're marked there in Washington, D.C. now. And they took the Capitol, marched right in a humiliating defeat. And when they got there, they got to the White House, or they got to the Capitol. Or first off, they got to the White House. And they immediately went through and looted and stole everything, and then burned it up. Burned up the executive mansion. Went to the Capitol, and just started destroying stuff. You can imagine what happened. You put 3,000 men who are not happy, but alive, so kind of overjoyed by that, and said, break everything. What did they do?
Break everything.
They're really good at breaking things. I will finish this after the test. So we got right to the burning of the Capitol. Oh, this is a painting of the White House. It was burnt, gutted. Only the facade stood. Yes, it's the same building as today. Because of the fire. But they didn't start calling the White House until about 20 years afterwards. Because it happened to be yellow, not white.
Wasn't it yellow?
Huh?
Wasn't that brick originally?
Yeah, they had a brick on the outside. Mm-hmm.
Why isn't there blue? Vice President, I think it like.
Why isn't it blue?
Or green, that'd be cool.
Red or gold?
Because it was already between paint and.
Almost certainly because white paint was cheaper and you cover up the blemishes from the fire. You go there, there's still bullet holes there.
They should make it like, like.
Oh.
Turquoise?
Or like one of those things like wherever you stand, it changes shades. Oh, we can work on this. Yeah.
So are we skipping over chapter 8 and coming back?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the next chapter it starts just the beginning of, it's called the Era of Good Feelings. And I like the Patience Unit about 1824. That's why I started.
Okay.
Yeah.
If like the notes, if there's like something I should do specifically about.
I'm not sure. What do you mean?
Like, is there something that I should focus on writing down specifically?
Well, I try to put in the main points, and so then you have to really listen to the parts that I really emphasize about what it means and try to get those down in your own words. Yeah, I don't really have an easy answer, but I really try to emphasize in class what are the most important things. And sometimes I even say, get this down.
Yeah.
But if you just write down the word that I put down on the PowerPoint, you will not get it. It's your job then to decipher in your own words about what are important things. Would you like a quiz? Were you gone all last week?
Yes.
Where were you?
I was exposed to it.
Typical. So you're the reason now it's spreading throughout the county. I assume you were fine.
Yeah.
And you watched everything.
Yeah.
That is kind of rough though when you think about it.
What?
Like, even like, cause you know, you have to quarantine, but then you get tested, but you test negative, but you still have to quarantine.
I know.
That sucks. Like,
But the thing is, especially